Hi everybody, welcome to Moessieurs. Today I'm going to show you the new John Mêlas software. It's called Motif Waveform Editor for Motif XS here on Windows 7. So this software allows you to opening Soundbank with voice and samples, so you can managing voices and sample. For example, you can copy a voice with samples from one bank to another bank without sample duplicate. You can also, like in the Total Librarian, move your voice, for example. You can rename a voice by made a double click here. You can also change the category of a voice and its subcategory. I'm going to show you an example here with one voice. We're using the sample kawaii from Keysense. I'm using a voice called Deep Blue. We're using the kawaii aiff and the kawaii AXMF. Here on position on the list of the waveform 2 and 1, like you can see in the waveform view. And I want to copy this voice. So I just done a right click and choose copy, shut down my window and opening the window of the other bank. And I will copy it on an empty space. And you can see that I have already the voice for using the same samples, but not in the same position. They are in position 69 and 70. So I'm choosing the empty space and simply made a right click and choose Past. My voice has been passed with all the elements. And the most important point that you can see is that my voice has been linked to the same sample already present in the bank with the good waveform numbers, and all the elements of the voice that I have passed are linked to the good waveform on position 70 and 69. If you want to pass some voices and samples, and that samples are not already present in the first bank, they will be passed and add at the end of the list of the waveform, and of course the element of the voice are linked to the good waveforms. And like you have seen, it's very easy to done. Right click copy, right click paste. Now we are going to see other features of this software. If you are working with samples and you're making your user voices by yourself, you can of course working with this editor, making new waveforms, import samples. In the Motif XS it's called keybank, and make your editing. So working on the waveform in the software, you have different windows. You have here the waveform window. Here you have the keybank windows, the samples link to the waveform. You can see that there is different samples keybank, and you have different information that you can view here. You have a graphic view of the sample here that you can listening. And you have the edit zone of the keybank. So you have the level, the pan, the root note, and you have the key range. And you can see the root note show here in red, and the key range you can see it in yellow on the keyboard view. You have the velocity sense and the playing mode of the sample, one shot, reverse, or loop. You can have also some waveform who are drum loops, for example, and you can listening them. So we are just going right click and play. And if you want to stop listening, you have just to make another time, right click and play a second time. like the sample is running on loop. Of course, if the sample have been only one shoot, you have listening only one time. In the waveform window, you can rename a waveform. You can move it also, of course. And if you move a waveform, the element of voices who are linked to the waveform suit the moving. There is dependence of the waveform and the element of the voice, of course. So let's see the file menu. You can create new voice file and save it like a voice file. You can create a new waveform file and save it like a waveform file. But you can also opening a all file for managing the voices and the samples, and the software will save it in all file, of course. You can opening all voice files and all waveform files from the Motif XS. Save as, close all files opening in the software. And you can opening and import waveform. It's an interesting window. You can opening wave5, aiff. It's more for drum loops, for example. You can import SF2 files, Sound Fount 2 files. So in this window, I have wave samples, and I'm going to search SF2 samples on my computer. For example, a piano. The importation is running. And here is my piano, and it will ready to use with my Motif XS, and you can see the list of the keybank who are present in this waveform. You can of course listening each sample, each keybank. And of course, if you need, you can edit them. Last item in the file view, you can also import slice if you have already done them in your Motif XS. In the edit menu, you can see a lot of functions that you can refine in the software by using the right click, but there is an interesting function. It's called search. You can write a name of a waveform, and you can easily find the waveform with the place in the list of the waveform. In the setup part, you have a MIDI input and audio. And you can use here, for example, the Motif XS8 main by FireWire connection, the output line of the Yamaha Sternberg FireWire driver of my N12. But of course, you can also use the USB connection and other driver from other sound card. What you need to understand about the MIDI part is that you cannot play the waveform or the samples on your Motif XS keyboard. The MIDI connection is for another function, for example, for change the root note and the key range on the software. You can of course use your mouse to change the root note, for example, but if you want to change 12 semitone, it will take time, because on each semitone it takes a little time to update the keybank, like you can see in the window. So with the MIDI input, you have a quickly way to done this job. You just made a right click and you can see that the value is flashing. And when it's flashing, you have just to press your finger on the keyboard of the Motif XS, and the note will be updated on only one step. And of course, you can use the same function with the key range if you need. So we have seen the different windows of the software. If you want to create a new waveform because you have samples on your computer, you need on the first step to create a new waveform. So in the waveform window, we are going to make right click and click on New Waveform. And like you've seen, it's ready to be renamed. Moessieux, for example, for the video. Now, like our new waveform has been created, we are going to import keybank samples. You can import sample one by one, or you can make a selection of the samples you want to import in one time. Here the editor is working, is importing the samples. And here you can see that the root notes are the same for all the samples. So in this case, if the root note is not included in the information of the WAV file, you must load them one by one and change it. You can also see that they have all the same key range, but we are not going to work on this part now. You can see later that there is a little function for working on this, and it's very easy to down. They are all in one-shot mode, and you see the format of the samples, the keybank. You can edit the keybank one by one by clicking on different parts on the top. You can also done this job by a specific view. Just select one keybank, make a right click and select parameter edit, and you can change what you want for this keybank on this specific view. Of course, the more interesting job is to edit the samples. So for this example, we are going to put this keybank in loop mode. And we are going, for example, to make a crossfade. And it's very easy to do. Just done a right click and select loop edit. The loop editor view is open. We have a sample which is not loop. On the keybank, you have a start point, represented by a red line. You have a loop point in blue line, and you have the endpoint in green line. So we are going to change a little bit the endpoint by moving the green line. And now I'm going to move the blue line for the loop point, searching with the graph position which seem to be good to make the crossfade. We have a play function for listening the sample. Here I have not made a crossfade, but you can listening what it's done in this position. Oh, I'm lucky. It's not too bad. So I will try another thing. A bad position, for example, for you to listening what is the bad way to done the job. So this is what you don't need to done, because you can hear the click noise and you cannot play a sample like that, of course, on your Motif XS. So remember that you need to choose enough pace between the loop point and the endpoint, and with the graph view choosing something which seems to be great. For helping you, you can zoom on the view and you can unzoom. And if you have made too much zoom and you want to return to the normal view, you have the fit function to return to the normal view on one click. You can normalize the sample if you find you have not enough gain. You can make also the famous crossfade function, which is not present in the Motif XS. Another thing that you cannot done on the Motif XS, it's alternating loop. Take the sample and copy, but in reverse. And the last function is the trim, to cut the samples outside the start point and the end point to win size. For example, if you have made a sample too long and it takes too much place, you can use the trim function. So now we are going to make the crossfade. I can use on the top on the crossfade, or made a right click and choose crossfade. And see near the green line, the graphic view will change on this part. So if you think you are fine for this job, you have just to click on OK. And if you find no, it's bad, it's not a good way to to have this sample loop, you just click to cancel, of course, and remade the loop editor running to make another choice. Just for example, here you can see how I can use the trim function to resize the sample. So if you have finished to work with your sample, now it's time to working on the key range by using the split function. So here in my example, I have the good roots note for each keybank, but I have not the key range. Each sample is only ranged to one note, and I want to split all the notes working for my Motif XS. So the job is very easy to do. Just select all the keybank and make a right click and choose keyboard split, and you have different type of split. You can split equally, you can choose split around roots, or you can choose create slice, but it's more specific working for the drum kits. So we are going to check split equally, and the key range is done for all the keybands and on all the notes present for my keyboard. Now let's check split around roots, and you can see that the key range is different, but here it's a specific example. It's samples coming from drums. For example, the first is the kick drum and another sound. And for this sample, I don't want to have the sound enlarged on the key range. I want to have, like for the XS drum kits preset, I want to have each note range by semitone. So the first step when we are going to work like this is to choose what is the first sample. For example, here I will select that my first sample will be the C2. So I will change the position of the C2 to be the first of the keybank. It's very important because the function ranges the note from this first sample. Now I will select all my keybank, and now I'm going to do a right click and choose the option keyboard split, create slice. And now see the roots note of each keybank, and you can see that they are suiting semitone by semitone. So it's a very nice function for building drum kits if you have different samples for drums. It's not a slice like on the Motif XS to cut samples. It's just for range the keybank on the keyboard by semitone. Now we have seen all the different functions of the software. So I hope that this little presentation will help you using the Motif Waveform Editor. Remember the most important function: you can copy voice from one soundbank to another soundbank with sample, without sample duplication. You can move and manage the voice and the samples are always linked to the element of the voice. You can working and editing waveform already present in the Motif XS file. You can create new waveform by using samples from Wave, aiff, aiff format and Sound Fount 2 file format also. You can edit each keybank with the loop editor using the crossfade or the alternating loop. Trim the samples also. If you are working on your Motif XS with samples and waveform, the John Mêlas Motif Waveform Editor is a fantastic tool.